On a July morning in 2008, a worker on the 14th floor of the Harmon Hotel ties a length of rebar to a structural cage and steps back. The sun over the Las Vegas desert is already past bearable. Below him, 9,000 workers are moving across a 67-acre site in controlled patterns. Concrete trucks, crane signals, the percussion of a construction project running at full speed. Above him, the building has 35 more floors to go. The tower is on schedule. The drawings are on file. The inspections are being signed. Everything is proceeding correctly, according to every piece of paper anyone will look at for the next several months. Somewhere on that floor, in the concrete link beam above a door opening, the rebar he just fixed is in the wrong position. He does not know this. His foreman does not know this. The structural engineer of record has not been on site. The third-party inspector hired by Clark County to prevent exactly this kind of error has signed a report certifying the work. It will later emerge that the report was signed before he arrived. There are 62 reports like that one. To understand what happened to the Harmon Hotel, you first have to understand the machine that was built to construct it. City Center was not a development project that happened to be large. It was a purpose-built construction apparatus, a web of contracts, roles, and legal responsibilities assembled specifically to manage a project of unprecedented size. The general contractor was Perini Building Company, one of the largest in the United States, responsible for coordinating every subcontractor on site and for the quality of the work being done under its supervision. The structural engineer of record was Halcro Yolas, a Canadian firm whose drawings defined precisely how every load-bearing element in the Harmon was to be built: the dimensions, the steel, the configuration. Its professional license certified that if built as drawn, the building would stand. The rebar subcontractor was Pacific Coast Steel of San Diego, the firm whose workers were physically placing and tying the steel on those floors, executing what Halcro Yoles had specified and what Perini was contractually obligated to verify. And then there was Converse Consultants. Converse was not hired by MGM. Converse was not hired by Perini. Converse was hired by Clark County, paid from public funds, answering to a public body, specifically because a county cannot rely on a general contractor to verify its own work. The third-party inspector is the structural backstop, the independent set of eyes whose job is to stand on the floor, hold the permitted drawings against what was built, and sign a document that goes into the public record certifying that the two things match. When Converse signed off on a floor of the Harmon, it was not an administrative formality. It was Clark County telling the public that it had looked and the building was safe. In the spring of 2007, ground was broken on City Center. The machine activated, and the flaw was already inside it. In the years before the financial crisis, MGM Mirage was building at a scale the city had never attempted. Not a bigger casino, not a new resort. Something more fundamental, a city within a city, a 67-acre mixed-use district on the Strip that would include 6 towers, 2 hotels, a casino, a retail pavilion, and 2,400 residential units, all rising simultaneously from a single continuous pour. The budget was $8.5 billion. It was the largest privately financed construction project in the history of the United States. To stand on the city center site at peak construction was to understand that figure physically rather than abstractly. There were cranes visible from the freeway. The concrete pours ran around the clock. At the height of activity, 9,000 workers reported to the site daily, more people than live in some American towns. MGM brought in architects from around the world: Daniel Liebeskind, Helmut Jahn, Raphael Vignoli. Each was assigned a tower. For the centerpiece, the tower that would anchor the south end of the site and face the Strip, MGM called Norman Foster. Foster had designed the 30 St. Mary Axe Tower in London, the one everyone calls the Gherkin. He had rebuilt the Reichstag Dome in Berlin. He was designing what would become Apple Park in Cupertino. He had won the Pritzker Prize, the Nobel of Architecture. He had also never built in Las Vegas, which is precisely the point. MGM was not trying to build a hotel. It was trying to make a statement about what Las Vegas could be. a city that commissioned serious architecture from serious architects, not just bigger versions of what already existed. Foster's design for the Harmon was specific and strange in the best sense. The footprint was oval. The cladding was blue glass arranged in a checkerboard pattern that would shift and shimmer depending on the angle of the sun. At 49 stories, the tower would have held 400 hotel rooms, 207 luxury condominiums, a spa, and a sky bar at the top, with views across the basin to the Spring Mountains. From certain approaches, it looked less like a building than like a vertical lens, something that gathered light and organized it. Somewhere between that design and the 14th floor, something had already begun to go wrong. A link beam is a short, heavily reinforced concrete element that connects two structural wall segments on either side of a door or window opening. In a high-rise building, the structural walls carry vertical load. They hold the building up, but in an earthquake or under high wind, the building is also pushed sideways, and the walls on either side of every opening want to move independently of each other. The link beam prevents that. It absorbs the lateral force by bending, shearing, and deforming in controlled ways that dissipate energy without allowing the wall to tear apart at its openings. To do this, the rebar inside the link beam must be placed exactly where the engineer specified, with the right bar diameter, in the right position, at the right spacing, tied in the right configuration. The concrete that encases it is only as strong as the steel inside. Get the steel wrong, and the beam cannot transfer the load. In July 2008, Clark County engineers arrived at the Harmon construction site with a specific set of documents: the permitted structural drawings, stamped and approved, showing exactly how the link beams on each floor were to be built. They walked the floors. They compared what the drawings showed to what had been built. On floor after floor, 15 of the 22 completed floors, the ones between the 6th and 20th stories, they found that the rebar in the link beams did not match the drawings, not in minor ways. The bars were in the wrong positions. They were the wrong size. On some floors, in some locations, they were absent entirely. The concrete had already been poured over most of them. The steel was now sealed inside hardened stone. Construction halted on the Harmon in July 2008. The question the site left behind was not technical. It was institutional. Start with what a daily inspection report is supposed to represent. A certified professional arrives on a construction floor with the permitted drawings. He examines the work in progress. He compares what he sees to what the engineer specified. He signs a document which enters the public record, certifying that a public authority has verified the work and found it compliant. That document is not a receipt. It is a legal certification of safety made to the county and through the county to everyone who will ever enter the building. Between March and July of 2008, Converse Consultants filed 62 such daily inspection reports on the Harmon. 62 documents certifying that the rebar work had been examined and found correct. Some were signed before the inspector reached the site. Some certified work that had not yet occurred on the day they were dated. Converse filed 62 reports, and the rebar was wrong on 15 floors. Perini Building Company, as general contractor, was responsible for the quality of every subcontractor's work on site. Pacific Coast Steel's rebar crews were Perini's crews, in the only sense that mattered contractually. Halcro Yola's, as structural engineer of record, held the professional license attached to the drawings that weren't being followed. Converse Consultants held the county's certification function. A small group of Clark County civil servants carrying permitted drawings found what none of them had. 2 months later, in September 2008, Lehman Brothers filed for bankruptcy. MGM Mirage's stock entered freefall. By the spring of 2009, the company's new CEO, Jim Murren, was looking at a balance sheet requiring $3.88 billion in refinancing just to survive. The financial crisis and the structural defects did not cause each other. They arrived close enough together that they became impossible to separate. A building that was structurally compromised now belonged to a company that was financially compromised, and every decision that followed had to account for both problems simultaneously. In January 2009, MGM canceled all 207 residential units. The tower was scaled back from 49 floors to 28. $600 million in remaining construction costs were deferred. The shell was topped out at 28 floors in December 2009. The glass went in. The lights never came on. In March 2010, construction officially stopped. That November, MGM wrapped the entire strip-facing facade of the Harmon in a vinyl mesh advertisement, tens of thousands of square feet of vinyl, covering a Foster Tower from the 3rd floor to the 28th, advertised Aria, Vdera, Crystals, and the Mandarin Oriental, the buildings that surrounded the Harmon on every side. By 2013, the local press was calling it the world's most expensive billboard. Norman Foster had designed a 49-story tower to anchor the south end of the most expensive private construction project in American history. What stood on that site was a sign for its neighbors. In 2011, MGM retained an engineering firm called Weidlinger Associates to answer a single question: could the Harmon be saved? Weidlinger's report ran to many pages. Its conclusion did not. The defects Weidlinger found were not localized or uniform. They were, in the firm's language, so pervasive and varied in character that no quick, temporary, or permanent fix was possible. Just estimating the cost and feasibility of a repair would require a full year of additional analysis. And, structurally, in a code-level earthquake, the link beams that had been built incorrectly on those 15 floors would fail. The members responsible for transferring lateral loads would cease to function. The building would lose its capacity to support its own gravity loads. The Nevada seismic record is not commonly understood outside the region. Las Vegas sits in a basin bounded by active fault systems, and the historical record includes events significant enough to cause structural damage to unreinforced masonry. MGM's own court filings acknowledged a 50% probability of a triggering earthquake in the Las Vegas basin within the next 30 years. In open court in March 2012, MGM's own structural engineer testified that a magnitude 7.7 event would be sufficient to bring the building down. The trap had 3 walls, and none of them moved. The building could not be repaired. The defects were distributed across 15 different floors, each set different from the last, each one sealed in concrete that would have to be demolished to access the steel. At that point, you were not repairing a floor. You were rebuilding it from the inside out, at height, in an occupied building complex. Weidlinger had said it plainly. There was no fix. The building could not be imploded. Implosion requires a collapse radius, a zone of cleared ground into which the debris can fall. The Harmon sat with the Cosmopolitan on one side, Aria on another, and active casino operations and pedestrian traffic on the strip directly adjacent. A traditional implosion in that footprint was not a legal question or an engineering question. It was a geometric impossibility. The building could not stay. The liability was explicit, the probability was documented, and the building was visible from the street to hundreds of thousands of visitors every year. What remained was deconstruction. A court approved the demolition in May 2014. The following June, workers in respirators appeared behind a black mesh shroud at the top of the 28th floor and began removing the building by hand, floor by floor, from the top down, in the same sequence that it had been built, in reverse. The process took 14 months. It cost $1.5 million to undo what $275 million had built. On August 4, 2015, Jim Murren stood in front of cameras and said, "The nightmare that was the Harmon is over." By late September, the site had been scraped to ground level. The Harmon holds a record that has not been broken. It is the tallest building in American history voluntarily demolished for construction defects. MGM sued Perini for approximately $393 million. Perini countersued for $492 million, arguing that MGM had used the structural defects as a legal pretext to exit a property that no longer made financial sense after 2008, that the financial crisis, not the rebar, was why the Harmon was never finished. The case was scheduled for trial in December 2014. On the morning opening, arguments were to begin. The parties settled on the courthouse steps. MGM paid Perini $153 million. Perini paid MGM $11 million. Insurance covered approximately $85 million more. No criminal charges were ever filed, not for the 62 falsified inspection reports, and not for anything connected to the Harmon Hotel. In 2021, MGM sold the cleared 2.5-acre lot to Flag Luxury Group for $80 million, roughly 30 cents for every construction dollar that had been spent on the tower above it. In April 2023, a 4-story open-air mall called 63 City Center opened on the site. The top floor is anchored by a steakhouse that cost $20 million to build. The footprint that Norman Foster designed to hold a 49-story oval glass tower now holds 4 stories of retail. On a July morning in 2008, a worker on the 14th floor tied a bar to a cage and moved on to the next one. The concrete came, it set. The building rose for a while, then stopped, then came down by hand. The bar is still there somewhere, under a steakhouse in Las Vegas. No one is looking for it.